17. The way to the minstrel's tent was swift. Whether that was because the creatures of Sasquatch had learned to fear them, or perhaps the stench of death served as proper warning, they could not say. Chesney urged them to haste regardless. The longer they lingered in this region, the greater the chances that what had happened at the consecrated grounds would be discovered, and that powerful forces would descend upon them. The trek was silent, and the air hung with raw feelings. Bone-weary from their many battles and near-death experiences, they rattled into the tent like walking corpses. Chesney desperately wanted to move on, for their own sake and for the sakes of everyone in the tent, but he was unwilling to push his friends any further than he had that day. They spent a silent time washing and repairing their clothes and armor, eating, and resting. Medea had been quiet for the trek home, but when she returned to the tent she made efforts to interact with everyone as normal. Chesney could instantly tell this was a facade, but knew better than to press her on it. She of course told him what had happened when he was struck down, but there was more there that she wasn't saying. He needed to approach her carefully, and now was not the time. So, for now, he'd play along and keep an eye on everyone. During supper, Wilde recovered enough to recount what had happened, praising Chesney and Medea especially for their heroic effort. The two cringed inwardly, but accepted the talk humbly. Success or no, they certainly didn't feel heroic, but maybe it was better to look back on the past and view your triumphs than to dwell on other things. From across the table, Himoans grew excited and almost shouted,
"You got the helm, right? I want to see. I want to see."
Her constant companion, Carice, nodded along excitedly. Shrugging, he grabbed the helm from beside his things and set it upon the table. The two girls stared in awe. Himoan said breathlessly,
"So cool. I've never seen anything like it. It's all, like, smooth, and etched, and gosh, I don't even know what to say looking at it. And is that glass? Say, can you put it on?"
Carice chimed in,
"Oh, and wield the sword too. I want you to wear them together."
Happy for a distraction, he took the helm and put it on his head. He stood, and unsheathed the sword from his hip, and held it to his chest. The table was silent, in awe anew.
"Gods and great ones,"
Himoan whispered.
"It's like looking at legend made real. You should see him fight."
Wild Stage whispered, leaning in with a grin. Suddenly, the attention was a bit too much, and he sheepishly removed the helm. Medea cleared her throat.
"Well, with the sword and helm in our possession, all we need left is to find a way to the throne of the immortals and retrieve the armor of Cormu. Then, at last, we should stand a chance."
Carice giggled and held Himoan's hands excitedly.
"Oh my stars, Himoan, can you imagine how he'd look with the armor too?"
Medea tilted her head and considered.
They're right. I think you'd look rather dashing in it, Chesney."
He groaned.
"Medea, don't you tease me too."
Wild, a mouthful of food, garbled out.
"So, like, does his stuff do anything?"
At their quizzical looks, she swallowed, and pointed to Medea.
"Like, with Sophie's crown, it gives her crazy healing powers, right? So, does Cormu's stuff do anything?"
All eyes turned to him again.
"They'll be well. It's kind of hard to explain. With the sword, I feel like when I hold it, the blade does something that makes it special. Like, it's hard to look at, or see clearly. Almost like it's vibrating, but not."
He pulled it out and showed everyone for a time before sheathing it once more.
"As for the helm, well, maybe it's more fun if I show you."
He donned it and stepped away from the table, facing away.
"Wild, throw a knife or something at my head. Actually, no, wait. Make it fast, Joe. Wild would just miss and stab me in the shoulder." "Hey,"
she grumbled, putting down the knife she was already lifting. Confidently, Fast Joe shrugged, lifted the butter knife at his side and tossed it expertly directly at the back of Chesney's head. Seemingly without effort, Chesney moved just enough to avoid the knife, and was able to catch it as well. The whole table gasped in astonishment. Even Medea was astounded.
Chesney, how did you do that?
She asked, standing without noticing. He removed the helm, smiled, and tossed the knife back to Fastjo.
Not sure. But when I put it on, it's like I'm subtly aware of everything going on right around me. And on top of that, it almost pushes me out of the way of some blows. I noticed it while we were running. Let me try. I want to try.
Wild jumped up, hands outstretched. Curious if such a thing would work for someone else, he tossed it over. She looked a bit silly with her long pink hair trailing behind the helm, but ran over to where Chesney had stood.
Okay, hit me, my guy. As you wish.
Fastjo agreed delightedly, and tossed the butter knife perfectly once more. It bonked loudly against the strange dark blue metal.
Hey! What gives?
She cried, taking the helmet off and looking at it critically.
Why didn't I get spooky dodge powers?
Chesney took it from her, and he and Midia's eyes met, letting something wordless pass between them. Mutual understanding and confusion both.
Well,
he said,
that's certainly the question I've been asking myself for weeks now.
Things settled down after that, and they finished their meal. Afterwards, Himoen stood and told them to wait a moment, while she went to get something. When she returned, she carried 4 sets of gaudy but well-made clothes.
Here, try these on.
Midia picked up a set of the clothes and looked them over.
Himoen, while I appreciate the gesture, I don't think these exactly suit.
She began to say, but was interrupted by Himoen rolling her eyes.
No, those are supposed to help you get to the armor. Duh.
Midia's mouth formed several different words before she finally uttered,
How?
Himoen groaned, picked up one set, and held them up to Midia's body.
The rope network by Barsis goes straight to the throne of the immortals. They would never allow a bunch of people from Nasquat to use it, but they let us travel there. See what I'm saying? So, if we wear these clothes, we'll look like part of the troop, and they'll let us ride? Bingo bongo,
she cried, joyfully picking out the outfits and matching them to whomever she thought looked best with them. Midia looked down at the set she'd been given. A shiny velvet pink fabric, styled to look almost like a prince's uniform, with very baggy ends on the arms and legs that ended in 3 layers of ruffles. The ensemble was completed with a deep purple wide-brimmed hat, with one brim folded flat upwards, and a long white plume trailed the back. When she looked up, she caught Chesney staring at her, and he couldn't stifle a chuckle. She narrowed her eyes.
Are you making fun of me, Chesney? No, I'd never,
he said, waving his hands defensively, but still unable to hide his grin. Himoen dashed in, placing another set against Chesney.
And this last one is for you.
It was the same shiny velvet, only patterned red and green argyle. His hat was enormous, gold and puffy like a great round pillow. It was comically large and lolled about his head however he turned. Midia's grin was mischievous.
Well, serves you right, teasing a lady like that.
Chesney groaned.
It's not that bad, is it?
Wild chose that moment to walk over in her own outfit, a short lime green top, burgundy skirt, and veils with gaudy jewelry.
Oh, love that hat, Midia! That's so fetching, somehow. Where's the big guy? Oh my gosh, what on Linus is that?
She couldn't contain herself and she burst into raucous laughter. Midia was unable to hold herself back now, and she joined in. Fastjo walked over, draped in something that seemed remarkably close to the ringmaster's outfit, only purple, and placed a reassuring hand upon Chesney's shoulder.
These are the burdens we must face for love and justice, my friend.
They were away at the first opportunity in the morning. Chesney shoved as much money as he could into the hands of the ringmaster. He begged him to take it, and if anyone came asking after them, tell them they had been turned away, but stolen actors' clothes in the dead of night. If anything happened to these people for the life-saving aid they had given them, he wouldn't be able to take it. They approached the tall rope network launched with the sun barely reaching around the eastern mountains. It was decided that Fastio would be the one to talk, as he was the oldest and had the most experience acting like a minstrel. They all tried to act with a light air as they approached. The guard sneered at them, but waved them on in with barely a second glance. Good. News hasn't gotten out yet, Chesney thought. The second level was full of whirring machines. There was a gated-off walkway attended by a bored-looking Doru attendant, watching listlessly as large metal cars attached to a thick rope slowly entered the open bay from outside, loop around the room, and go back outside.
Gruff-voiced, he said, "Departures, 3rd floor,"
and pointed above. They followed his instructions to find a younger Fiorlaw girl, barely older than Wild and with short red hair growing past her segmented dark green forehead plate, waiting for them with a smile, though it slightly faltered when she saw what they were wearing.
"Hi there. Welcome to the Rope Network. Departing for Requien and the Throne of the Immortals." "Indeed, young lady. There are some supplies we need to fetch for the troop." "Oh, not heading for a pilgrimage then? That's a shame. I haven't had anyone come by for one in ages,"
she said, shaking her head sadly.
"Well, if you see Joanne there, tell him hi from Lizette."
She led them through a long empty queue leading to the open area where the metal cars rolled in and out of the bay.
"All right. Have you ridden the Rope Network before?"
The group exchanged looks, and answered in a jumble of contradictory answers. Lizette laughed and said,
"That's okay. I'll explain it all anyway. Stay seated at all times, and do not rock or bounce the car while in transit. It's pretty high up, so if you start to feel dizzy, just look at the ground. There are waste bags provided in case of nausea."
"Lady, I've flown on a dragon. I can handle a little dinky rope trip." She practically shoved them into the next available car and waved goodbye at them pleasantly. The inside was spacious enough for 4 to travel without awkwardness, though they did have to seat 2 by 2, facing each other. Midia grabbed Chesney's hand quickly and sat him down beside her. Wild and Fastio took the opposite side, though Wild winked at Midia, who blushed very slightly. Chesney, of course, was oblivious to all of this as he craned his neck this way and that, all the windows and air vents to see what he could see. As they were seated, a simple melody seemed to play from somewhere, followed by a pleasant female voice.
"Hello there, and welcome to the Rope Network, initially created by the Great Ones long ago to connect the people of Lennis together. The network is now maintained by the Skyview Corporation, a joint effort in good faith between the Nasquat and Sasquat governments. Just sit back and relax while we take you safely to your destination. We hope you enjoy your trip to the Throne of the Immortals. And remember, with Skyview, the sky's the limit."
After a beat, Wild said,
"What in the world was that?" "Some kind of technology, I guess,"
Midia said, tilting her head in thought.
"Speaking of which, didn't it seem to you everyone that Sasquat was a little more advanced than Nasquat? Technologically, I mean." "Well, some parts, yeah. Barsis looked even more backwoods than Ratzurk did, but the museum was certainly really fancy."
Fastio entered the conversation.
"Actually, you'll find that part of the reason for that is because of Zagos. Part of his power is that he's fascinated with ancient Regan technology, and has promised to bring back a golden age. It's not everywhere, yet, but he's determined to industrialize the continent."
His voice darkened, and he continued.
"However, that's also where some of the trouble lies. He hoards everything he can find and uses powerful artifacts to keep hold of his power. He's even began subtly changing history about the Great Ones, lowering their importance, and heightening his own. It is as though he wants his name to be spoken of in the same breath as them."
For a time, they watched as the landscape below them sailed by at a leisurely pace. Wild and Chesney seemed fine with the gentle rocking of the car, but the longer Midia stared at the horizon the greener she became. She groaned.
"This is worse than that time Dad tried to take me out to sea on that boat he spent all summer on. Took him hours too."
She stopped a moment to burp and groan again.
"To clean it out."
Fastio passed her some water.
Here, something cool should help.
She nodded gratefully and took a sip. Chesney tried rubbing her back.
Thanks.
She told them both.
Say, maybe a distraction would help. Fast, Joe. Would you mind telling us a bit more about why you know so much about Zagos? If that's... okay, I mean.
Slowly he nodded.
Yes, it's fine. After all this time, I don't mind sharing.
The northern coast of Sasquatch was beginning to come into view as they rolled lazily over some mountains. He turned his face to watch, memories clouding his eyes, as he told them the tale. Years ago, he was part of a small town, mostly of Lubat, who had come to live apart from society due to being ostracized. Things as they were back then. Sasquatch was like a half-dozen little areas all controlled by warring factions, and the Lubat wanted none of it. Zagos changed all that. Over years, he accumulated power, and took over all the areas one by one. Many were happy that soon there would be a continent without war, and all could live in peace. But instead, things got worse. Traitors, Zagos said, were everywhere, and had to be rooted out. Anyone who questioned him was rounded up. Whole families disappeared, and the Lubat were the worst hit. Fast Joe, and his closest friends, all joined the resistance together. Together, they trained and fought, sabotaging Zagos' plan, freeing prisoners. It felt amazing to be freedom fighters. But, one by one, his friends didn't always come back from their mission. Always more funerals. At the end of it all, it felt like they'd done nothing to stop Zagos' plans, and all they had really done was gotten innocent people killed. So, he gave it up. He wanted to find the joy of life again, and after a long time wandering, joined a traveling troupe of minstrels and put his sword-fighting skills to a much better use.
Dude, that's crazy,
Wild said quietly.
I had no idea Sasquatch was like that, where people would just be like, snatched up, and people let that happen.
He shrugged.
The ones who benefited were happy. Everyone else? They were scared. It never occurred to the former that they could be snatched up next, and the latter knew to keep their heads down.
Chesney shook his head in dismay.
I have to ask, Fast Joe, knowing what I know now, I can't believe you asked to join us. Why did you?
Fast Joe simply raised his hands in his own confusion, and smiled wistfully.
Who can say? I saw you there, trying to fight to save the world. Just children, on your own. It reminded me so much of the times before it all went sour, when everyone still had hope. I just felt like I saw hope again and needed to protect it. Beyond that, I cannot say. There are no words.
With great tenderness, Medea leaned forward and touched his knee.
Thank you so much, Fast Joe, for coming along, fighting beside us, sharing your pain, for everything.
A few heartbeats later, Chesney pulled out a deck of cards from his robes, grinned like a fool, and said,
Okay, who wants to be crushed in a game of sucker's draw?
They all joined in as the smell of the salty sea air, gentle calling of seabirds, and shuffling of cards changed the atmosphere of the cabin. Fast was a skilled card player, and soon he was teaching them another card game that was popular in Sasquatch, Sour Maids. Everyone's mood was recovering fast. Even Medea was distracted enough to begin humming soft tunes under her breath, while she considered her moves, and the smiles she gave when she would play a good hand were as genuine as Chesney could determine. Something about seeing that smile again, even if it wasn't directed at him, made Chesney feel warm and safe in a way he hadn't felt for months. Soon, the southern coast of Nasquat came into view, and before it, the huge looming shape of the throne of the immortals. Everyone turned to see it. There was not a more culturally significant sight in all of Lennis. Hundreds, thousands of worshippers flocked to it every year to pray, or bask in the legends of the Great Ones and the immortals of Rhaegar. It was said that every person should make the journey at least once in their lives. It rose out of the ocean like a great flower, like craters stacked on top of one another in smaller layers, with an open area at the top. The massive set of craters was topped with a tall, rounded tower-like structure of shiny green metal. A dozen metal walkways of the same metal connected the suspended tower, or building, or vessel thing in the center to the rocky, hollowed-out crater, above which it rested. It was said this is where the Great Ones first arrived at Lenus, here where they first met their gods. This spot, where their holy vessel descended from the heavens. Around it, in reverence, the people of Lenus built this place of worship. From here, they ruled and taught and led.
Dude,
Wild gasped.
we're going to rob this place? Are we sure about this?
Chesney hung his head. He felt ashamed each time he touched the artifacts. Now, he was going to desecrate the holiest place on the whole planet and steal its greatest treasure. Yes, they were doing it to save the world. But the difference between saviors and thieves was only different in how they were used after the fact. And he hoped beyond hope he wouldn't have to do what he had done to the consecrated grounds here in this holy place. He held his hands in prayer and pressed them to his head. Poor Mu. I cannot lie and say I am one of the faithful. But please, look down on me with forgiveness. I am doing my best to make up for what I have done. I don't know if I even deserve to call upon you for your blessing after the things I have done. But please, if not for me, then for my friends, and for the people of Lenus, please, have mercy on your children. A small hand softly traced his back.
It's okay, Chesney. I know the Great Ones would forgive us.
Medea whispered only loud enough for him to hear. He snuffed softly. A dozen heartbeats passed. He covered his face before he whispered,
Do you really think they could? Well, if they don't, I'll give them a piece of my mind. Don't forget, Chesney, they're not blameless in all this. They left that horrible machine here, wherever they went.
That was a good point. Even gods can make mistakes. Where did they go? And why did they leave so suddenly? Wild gulped and looked pensively at the looming structure.
We're not going to. You know, again, right?
Chesney straightened and shook his head.
No. We'll think of something. I'll go alone if I have to. Well, that's not happening.
Medea laughed airily.
Even if I have to sit on your back and make you carry me. Oh, immortals, you're way too heavy. I'd die instantly, all my bones broken at once.
Chesney said, doing his best to hide his smirk.
Ooh!
Wild crowed. Medea gasped in shock.
You did not just say that. You take that back.
The confines of the cabin made it very hard to dodge the outraged girl, but he didn't mind a few welts. It was just too fun to tease her sometimes. Soon, they passed under the shadow of the throne of the immortals, and into a tunnel. The tunnel shortly opened into a vast hollow where a sprawling city seemed to be nestled at the foot of a mountain that rose into the center of the cavern. Though he couldn't make out what was at the top of the mountain, the great hanging structure at the crater mouth hung just above it. Below, dozens of polished purple egg-shaped houses surrounded the mountain, and many people could be seen milling their way about to and fro. Though the thoroughfare seemed wide, far too wide for the paltry numbers of people who moved about. Everything seemed too empty, too lonely, as though the place was built for much larger crowds and had fallen into disuse. Chesney turned to Fast Joe.
Do we still need these clothes? Or are we going to get lynched otherwise?
He seemed to consider this.
Well, that's hard to say. I think for now, we are better off keeping the clothes on. Who knows if they'd find some people from Nasquat suspicious. Minstrels, at least, I know are at the very least tolerated.
Chesney sighed, looking at his big poofy gold hat before putting it back on.
Wonderful. Everyone else's costumes look at least okay. Wild looks like she could have a job in Jareen, even.
Medea barked a single great laugh at that before she covered her mouth with her hand.
What?
Wild asked, looking between the two.
What joke am I missing here?
Medea once again gave Wild's veils and gaudy jewelry outfit another look.
The funny thing is, I think she'd actually end up being really great at it too.
Medea sighed, calm enough to speak. Then it was Chesney's turn to snort.
Oh, come on. That's not fair. I have to know now.
Wild huffed, crossing her arms and pouting when she didn't get a further response. Soon, their cabin entered one of the great open bays of another rope network hub building. It was remarkably identical to the one in which they had departed, save for a different attendant waited on the empty platform. Once the car began to slowly circle around to begin the trip back, the attendant waved everyone out as quickly as possible.
Okay, everyone off, let's go.
The Fiorla man said, constantly gesturing his arms in the direction of out. It seemed he did a double take when he saw them more clearly. He patted around his body, looking a bit flustered. Once they were all out, he sighed, took a breath, and started with a well-practiced spiel while he led them downstairs.
Right. Hello, and welcome to Requien, home of legendary Riculian folklore and the throne of the immortals. Please be advised that as a major pilgrimage site, Requien is considered neutral ground, and any harassment against people from Nasquat or Sasquat will be dealt with harshly. The path to the summit is open during regular business hours. Oh. Right. The passage back to Barsis is currently closed due to maintenance concerns, so you will at minimum be here at least a day while that is sorted out. We apologize for the inconvenience.
The attendant hardly seemed to have taken a breath during the whole spiel, but somehow managed to get through it all with just enough time to shove them out the door and close it behind them.
Well, that guy doesn't waste any time, does he?
Medea said, frowning.
Didn't he seem a bit eager to be rid of us?
Wild shrugged.
I can sorta understand it. When you just need to get people moving, nothing works better than a mind-numbing, well-rehearsed spiel. Oh yeah, I recall your safety briefing was pretty rapid-fire too.
Chetsney said. Wild's hands were brought up into angry claws.
The number of times I've had to explain something to someone right after I say all that, despite just having said it, almost makes me want to fly into a rage even now.
Medea considered for a moment, then shrugged.
Maybe you're right. I'm probably just overthinking things.
At ground level, the place definitely had something of a touristy feel, but way less outlandish than Lagan had been. To the north was a large gate that seemed to be the path towards the summit, guarded by a single ostentatiously dressed guard. Just around it were several staple businesses, restaurants, an inn, general store, and weapon stores, all around a central plaza. Far away around the mountains to the east and west were quieter businesses that slowly gave way to understated neighborhoods of homes. It must be so strange to live here, surrounded by all this legendary ancient architecture, Chetsney thought, considering the incredible metallic structure above them. While I looked around thinking of where to go first, a kindly-looking Fiorla woman in priestess robes approached them. Her auburn hair was long and pleated together in a beautifully ornate style that draped over her front, while her dark green forehead plate was covered with a white hood with red accents. Her face was warm and loving, and she approached them with gentle, silent movements.
Hello, weary pilgrims, and welcome to Requien. I assume you're here to pay your respect.
Everyone turned to Chetsney. Gee, thanks guys. I thought Fashta was supposed to be doing the talking here. He cleared his throat and said,
Yes, we've come to visit the throne for our pilgrimage.
Somehow, the priestess's smile grew even more beatific when he said that.
Oh, that wonderful news. Very few people have been making the journey in these last months. I hear that something terrible happened in Nasquat. Is that true? Why do you ask?
Crap. Are we that obvious? The priestess laughed lightly, her voice like the tinkling of bells.
Oh, please do not fret. This is a town of freedom and charity. Even those of Nasquat are welcome here. We all pray to the Great Ones. We all worship together here. There is no need to try to fit in or pretend to be anyone else.
Sighing, Chetsney removed his hat.
Well, I guess that's good to know. Come on, we might as well take them off if they weren't fooling anyone.
Feeling like children caught with their hands in the cookie jar, they took off the actors' gaudy clothes and stuffed them away. Thankfully, nobody seemed to pay them more than a passing glance.
There, does that not feel better? To worship as yourselves. Now, I apologize for scaring you with my question. There are so many rumors floating around about what has happened in the world. I was simply too curious to know what you may know. But it is of no matter. Our Lord Zagos has promised to fix everything very soon. Now, do you have any questions? I'm here to help all who seek to make the pilgrimage. Well, just out of curiosity, what does the pilgrimage entail? It is very simple,
she said, gesturing to the guard at the great gate.
Once you pass through that gate, you will be at the foot of a climb. Those who make the climb are encouraged to open their hearts to the blessing of the immortals of Riga as they proceed. At the very top, you will find our high pilgrim, Joan. His grace guards our most sacred relic, the armor of Cormu. There, he leads all followers through prayer. He's also one of the most knowledgeable researchers of the Great Ones, and can tell you many things.
Wild shot her hand up.
Oh hey, excuse me, question? So the armor is just sitting up there for anyone to see, right? Aren't people afraid someone could take it?
Once more, soft melodic laughter.
Oh no. After all, where would such a thief go? There is but one path to leave. Plus, few would risk the anger of the Great Ones for desecrating their sacred treasures. Rest assured, all is safe, my friend. We are all friends here.
Wild was raising her hand to ask another question, but in a smooth motion Chesney took her arm and lowered it and gave his winningest smile.
Thanks so much, priestess. I can't wait to get started. Right, everyone?
Everyone took the hint and nodded along like bobble-headed lackeys.
Lovely. You bring me hope today. Pilgrims, thank you. May the immortals bless your journey with love, courage, and wisdom.
She touched her heart, lips, and forehead, then bowed to them before walking away. Chesney lightly smacked Wild's head, and admonished in a harsh whisper.
What were you thinking with that question? Don't you think people might be a little suspicious if we ask something like that, and then the armor up and vanishes? Relax, big guy. It was a harmless question. And now we know what we're up against, don't we? Well, there were better ways to find that out.
She shook her head airily.
Well, whatever. Let's just get moving.
They made a stop in the general store on the way. Chesney had a veritable mountain of crystals to pawn off, supplies to buy, and bottles to refill. The owner gave them a knowing look, though he was all smiles. They left with pockets much lighter than they should have been. Medea was glowering at the owner when she saw the gold left over after all the transactions, but quietly wiped it into her pouch and left the store without a word. Under her breath she came up with several colorful curses.
Freedom and charity indeed.
The rest of the walk was quiet. They considered stopping for some food, as Wild had been hoping to try that famous Kubo steak, but Chesney was eager to be seen as little as possible, and Medea was still sour from being cheated at the store. The great plaza yawned wide, with many worshippers and staff in robes. Once more, they stood out in not wearing them, but it didn't seem to be too terribly uncommon to not wear them either. None of the worshippers seemed keen to ascend, strangely enough. Many seemed content to simply pray on their knees and prostrate themselves forward until their foreheads clacked on the paved stones near the gate. One particularly odd man in clerical robes so strange that none of them had ever seen before seemed to be looking all about, altogether very lost. There was a strange yellow cross symbol, and his white robes were accented blue instead of red. On top of all that, he wore a curiously tall hat, similarly designed. He could not have been more out of place. Curious as they were, they hadn't the time to find out more. Whatever his story was, it would sadly remain a mystery to them. In a moment, they were before the guard of the great gate. The gate was designed to be quite wide, though much of it was cordoned off with temporary fencing. The fencing clashed terribly with the reverential architecture of the gate, two tall towers with pointed spires, joined together by a double arch. The techniques employed were simple: smooth surfaces, subtle purple colors, and carvings of the three great ones. Sophie on the left tower, looking to the center with arms outstretched. Gabnit on the right, looking to the center with book and ball in hand. Cormu on the arch, sword in hand, kneeling. The guard was wearing immaculately polished armor. It was gold-plated, and etched with intricate flowering designs interspersed with what could only be Reagan symbols. They recognized a few from the bottles. In his hands was a tall halberd, with the metal polished to a mirror shine. The guard did not even glance in their direction as they approached. As they assembled in front of him, at last he spoke, loudly and clearly, as though he was speaking to a whole crowd.
"Travelers, why have you come?"
"Well, this is just weird. Isn't that obvious?" Chesney began to answer, only finding his voice a little squeaky. Clearing his throat, he began again.
We are pilgrims, come to ascend the throne of the immortals." "Pilgrims, then?"
he almost shouted back.
"Very well. This is the place you seek. You may ascend to the throne from here. However, know that since the great disaster that befell Naysquat, the journey here has become perilous, and none have made the climb in many weeks. If you value your lives, I suggest you turn back." "Why is he shouting? Who is he even talking to?"
Wilde whispered quietly behind him, into Midia's ear. Midia covered her face to hide her mirth and elbowed Wilde in the side to be quiet. Chesney responded,
"Well, nonetheless, we will make the climb."
At last, the guard looked at him directly.
"Truly, you intend to make the ascent? Are you brave or foolish? Regardless, I will let you pass. 2 things, though."
The guard looked at them gravely. At everyone's raised eyebrows, he continued,
"First, there is a fee of 100 gold, for site maintenance." "Geez, I thought it was going to be something, like, important."
Wilde groused as Midia opened her pouch and handed over the money. Midia asked, moving up beside Chesney.
"And the second?"
The guard smiled and waved them past.
"When you see Joan, the High Pilgrim, give him my warmest regards."
A few paces away, Chesney said to the group,
"Well, odd as the man was, he and that priestess are about the nicest people from Sasquatch I've ever met. Well, I mean, other than the minstrels in the tent and you, of course, Fastjo."
Something between a tall hill and a small mountain, the slopes before them loomed high. There was a well-worn path that seemed easy enough to follow, and so they did. The hill was mostly barren, with ashy dirt held together with sparse, hardy-looking plants. The rest was hidden as they walked the narrow path between rolling, rising hills.
"Hold on,"
Fastjo said.
"Now that we are not training, I have some magic that would be of use. I can keep most of the beasts at bay. Shall I do so?" "By all means,"
Chesney said, shrugging.
"It's not like I like fighting for my life every day." Destry had that ability too. "What spirit gives you that, Fastjo?"
Midia asked, as they walked, suddenly feeling much more calm and at peace.
"I believe it would be heart, Miss Midia." I wonder where he got it. Speaking of which, I don't think I've seen a single spiritual temple while we've been down here. Did you, Chesney?"
she asked, turning to him.
"Well, come to think of it, I think I saw a glimpse of one in Barsus. The symbols on it looked familiar though, so I didn't give it much thought. We made so much progress in attaining spirits up until now, and now suddenly it's like we've hit a wall." "I know what you mean. I should have been thinking on the task that the previous spiritualist master gave me, on why only 2 spirits seem to interact at a time. Oh, and also, did you remember where you got Earth from?"
She shook her head.
"Not a clue. I haven't forgotten to try and remember. Just, things have been a bit hectic."
The path was almost claustrophobic with how close the path stuck to the rising hills, but that strange feeling of peace helped maintain their calm. About halfway up, they spotted an abandoned monster den. By the looks of it, something huge resided there. Maybe even several somethings. Vasjo said.
Looks like a footsore lair. We're lucky it's not here. I doubt we could have walked past unmolested otherwise. Huge gray-green things, with long tusks and fat trunk-like legs. Sounds like those Elepsors.
Wild thought out loud.
I wonder if they're related? How could they be? Nasquat and Sasquat are separated by a huge ocean.
Medea said.
There's no way for an animal like that to make the journey.
Chesney gasped excitedly, then dashed forward right into the back of the den, saying,
Guys, check this out.
He pushed aside a great amount of muck and debris, revealing another emergency supplies container. Shaking her head, Medea sighed.
How do you keep finding these things?
Giggling with rare glee, he opened the chest, saw what was inside, and crowed.
Wild. Give me a fanfare.
She was momentarily taken by surprise by the request.
Huh. Oh. Okay. Dun-dun-na-na.
He reached in and revealed another bottle. This one was familiar, another bottle of ibuprofen. Medea rushed over, practically shoving Chesney aside as she grabbed the bottle and looked it over.
Get out. This is incredible.
She joined in his mirth, grabbed his hands and jumped excitedly.
I can't believe we found another one.
Moments later, he realized she was holding his hands and standing very close to him. Almost with a yelp, she stepped back.
Sorry.
Chesney laughed, and wasn't quite sure where to look. Clearing her throat, Medea mastered herself and held her BOMB bottle and the high bottle together, considering them.
Which should I keep on my belt, though? Well, considering you can heal a bit already, I'm thinking you should keep the bombs more handily available. We can keep the ibuprofen in the bag, and heal with that when we need to between fights. And in the middle of fights, use the one I have.
Her face grew serious in consideration. Her features changed subtly from moment to moment. At last, they reattached the bomb bottle to her belt, and put the ibuprofen bottle in the bag.
Well, let's try it and see.
The way to the top was peaceful, and lonely. There was no animal life at all, though signs of its passing were everywhere. Like a strange bubble was around them, shooing away creatures before they could even see them. They felt like ghosts, wandering a lifeless land. There was no wind, no birdsong. Slowly, with each bend in the path turning them up a higher way, they approached the top. The hanging structure of the crater mouth loomed ever greater above them. From here, it truly looked utterly alien. There was an inescapable feeling when looking upon it that this had not been born of Lenneth, but had come here from somewhere else. No doubt, the heavenly land of Riga. The actual purpose of the immense structure seemed completely unknowable, like a plaything the gods had cast aside before leaving. Could anyone on Lenneth understand it? Such a task seemed impossible to Chesney.
What do you think that whole thing is for, Medea?
He said with awe plain in his voice. She craned her neck to look as well. Her voice was quiet with awe too.
I don't know. I don't feel anything special when I look at it. But it also kind of scares me. Is it safe? Is it dangerous? How could we even know? You know? Yeah. I can understand that feeling. I lived underneath the Tower of Gabnid for a whole year, never suspecting what was waiting above. But now that I know what I know, I have to wonder if they left that behind. What else did they leave behind?
Midday was nigh by the time they reached the summit. Soa was dead center in the sky, casting its light over the entire town below, and base of the mountain as well. The summit, however, was left in shadow, as it was underneath the great structure over the crater mouth. Small, thin shadows from the support structure spread over everything, focusing everything upon them. It was beautiful and disquieting all at once. The summit was wide and flat. The iridescent purple rock of the mountainside was almost polished with the footsteps of countless pilgrims and worshippers. There were a few buildings there that gave Chesney a strong sense that he had seen their likeness before. They, too, wore the symbol of the teardrop that was on Sophie's crown. There was a man here, too, tall and peaceful, with his back turned to them. Fiorella, as seemed most common among the peoples of Sasquatch, and wearing beautifully ornate robes of red, white, and gold hanging down his body as though he were clothed in tapestries. And at last, there, in the center of the clearing on a great golden pedestal, was the final piece, the final key to saving this world. The armor of Cormu. It matched the sword and helm perfectly. Metal, yet not. Organic, yet not. Smoothly etched curves. Dark blue, with golden etchings. The shoulders were the more distinct thing about it. It was almost decorative in its fineness. Angled pauldrons made of the same metal, only instead of fully covering the shoulders, they were like geometric wings made of thin metal rods like a mesh or net. Chesney's heart rate doubled as he saw it. It seemed almost dreamlike to see it standing so simply, so easily within reach. He gasped involuntarily at the sheer emotion. The man evidently heard that, for he spoke without turning.
"Oh, pilgrims, at last."
His voice was soft and kind, and had that lilt of good-natured humor about it that was impossible not to instantly like. He chuckled.
"I had begun to think they'd all forgotten me down there."
The man had been busy sweeping.
"Let us begin with a prayer of gratitude. Then, I can share some of the deeper understandings. One moment."
Stashing the broom off to the side, he returned with a smile and dusting off of hands.
"Now, let me have a look at you."
His voice trailed off, eyes wide. His steady, astonished gaze swung between Chesney and Medea in equal measure. The pair looked at each other at the same time, sharing the same worry instantly. Was Sasquatch aware of them and their purpose already? Was this some trap? Their worry mixed with total confusion as the man fell to his knees, clasped his hands in prayer, and said,
"Oh, I dared not believe it, but I see it now with my own eyes and feel it with my own heart. The great ones have returned. The immortals have sent us our saviors once more."
His eyes were filled with awe and reverence. The two were paralyzed with bewilderment. With wide eyes, Wild and Fastio regarded the scene, and each other's reactions, but stayed quiet.
"Please, save this world, great ones,"
the high pilgrim Joan cried, on his knees, hands outstretched towards them.
"Wait, what? Please, don't."
The two of them rushed to the man's side and babbled incoherently their protestation, trying to get him to stand once more. Though they eventually succeeded in getting him to stand, the raw emotion and gratitude in his eyes never truly left, and it made them uncomfortable to see the reverence he offered them. A million questions and protests lived and died in their throats unspoken. The diplomat spoke when he could not.
"Please, sir, stop. You're mistaken."
Her voice sounded scared, almost wounded.
"This crown, it's not. I'm just—"
Joanne breathed deeply, and then held his hands out in a gentle manner, as though to calm them.
"Please, forgive me for my outburst. I know Daphne told me you were coming, but until I met you, I could not hope to believe." "Wait."
Chesney spoke, before he even felt the question coming.
"Did you say Daphne told you we were coming? What did she say, exactly? What are you talking about?"
Realization seemed to dawn on the high pilgrim.
Oh my. You didn't know."
He rubbed his forehead in concern, and spoke quietly to himself.
"How could they not know?"
His face was the picture of empathy when he looked at them both in turn, and said,
"Chesney, Medea, you two are— how do I even put this? You are the second advent, the second coming of our great heroes, Cormu and Sophie."
The words landed on him like an avalanche. It was like his mind rejected them before he could process them. The world wobbled.
"That's impossible. I have parents. I was born here, on Lennis. I'm a Laffery for crying out loud. Medea, too. She is a Laffery."
They looked at each other. Fear danced between their eyes.
"Aren't we?" "Please, explain. I don't understand. What are you saying?"
Medea added, her voice so quiet and small and fragile.
Children, please, let me explain. I could tell the instant I saw you. I am one of the greatest research of the great ones. There is nothing that Lennis knows of them that I do not know, as limited as that is. Paintings, art, untold legends, and ancient records. I've seen them all. The ancient tales told of those who came here from Holy Rega, that they had an aura to them. To see them and speak with them was to instantly feel it crash against you, and to know them as other and holy. Moreover, having seen the ancient art depicting them, I can say with surety that you both resemble them greatly.
Wild whispered to Fast Joe.
Wait, is that what the feeling was?
Fast Joe whispered back.
Ah, I see you felt it too. I thought it was just some feeling I had, but looking back, it was different, wasn't it?
Chesney and Medea whipped around and stared at them, mouths open in shock. Instantly the two companions backed up, hands up in surrender. Wild said,
Whoa, calm down. I just mean, like, when I first saw you, it was kinda like, damn, eyes drawn right to you. Hard to really explain. I'm sure it's nothing.
They had felt something when they saw us. Then, the pair looked at each other. That connection between them that went beyond words and understanding when they had first laid eyes upon each other. That which had drawn them together and held them close against the hardships of their journey. Had it been this aura? That moment when he had first seen her in the cave. When they locked eyes, he couldn't look away. It was like finding the sun existed when you had only ever lived in darkness. He couldn't explain it, but he felt some strange familiarity or inevitability when he looked at her. It was an impossible to describe feeling. And then, that night, when she had come to him,
I know this is going to sound weird, but when I saw you in that cave, it was like, pow, like a lightning bolt. I felt like I was fated to meet you. Is that weird? No. I felt something too. Like, not that I knew you, but that I should know you. That it was important I found you.
What does this all mean? It can't mean what it sounds like it means.
We resemble them how? Second Advent. What do you mean? Are you saying we're them? Or their children? Or, we're them brought back to life? Or, what?
Medea asked, her voice shaking. Chesney knew his mother. That knowledge was like a shield over his own sense of self. Medea had no such protection. She had been found on a beach, alone, with the crown, the night after a comet.
Please, calm yourself, Miss Medea. I will try and explain as best as I can. In honest truth, I do not know. All I know is that you feel like how they should feel, and you very closely resemble them. It is not to say you are a perfect mirror, but that you rhyme with your ancient counterparts. What conclusion am I to reach other than that you two are some kind of return, or second coming of the great ones of old? Oh, I wish I could show you the great art to show you what I mean. That look, the way you stand, the hair, the eyes, your eyebrows, each whispers and tells me. I do not know how else to explain.
Chesney felt like he was drowning, but almost on instinct he grabbed Medea's shoulder and brought her beside him, to steady her against this.
What did Daphne tell you?
He said slowly, his voice full of false calm. But there was a tension in his mind that was like a thread being pulled tighter and tighter, on the verge of snapping.
She spoke to me, personally, a long time ago. Told me that something terrible was brewing in Lennis, and that soon I would meet a boy and girl, Chesney and Medea, who held the spirit of the great ones Cormu and Sophie within them. And when I did, I must do everything in my power to aid them.
She had lied to them. Lied to him, right to his face. The memory of that moment of acceptance in her cave came to him.
Why me? Young man, you were able to activate that damn machine. Do you think in 10,000 years, nobody has snuck in and tried that panel? And Medea, do you think that crown works for just anybody? I don't know everything, but I have a strong hunch that those items are only going to work for you. Chesney. What does that mean? Honestly, I have no idea. But I sincerely believe that if we have any hope of saving this world, it rests with you two.
She had known all along, lied and manipulated them, giving them just enough information to go off and risk their lives, while she kept their true identities secret. And for what? What right did she have to keep it from them? How dare she? How dare she ask so much, and keep that from us? Medea looked at him.
Do you remember what Strabo called us?
It took him a moment to go through the memory.
He called us a lot of things. Brave ones, great heroes, little ones, warriors. At the end, you know what he called us.
He did. He had passed it off as mad ramblings of a dying mind.
Great ones.
Angrily he tore his hand through his hair.
But wasn't that just him being?
He started, but couldn't think of the word.
Weird. Crazy? Insane? Maybe he only sounded crazy because he knew 10,000 years worth of things we had no idea about. Maybe he knew exactly what he was saying.
Joanne sighed. He looked so regretfully at the pair.
I'm sorry that I was the one who had to tell you. What does it all mean in the end? I do not know. I don't know where you came from, how this is possible. But the long and the short of it is, you two have a destiny that you must fulfill in order to save this world. Does that knowledge truly change your intentions?
Deep down, since he met Medea, he knew something was different about him. He had seen the evidence time and time again. Yet, somehow, having it told plainly to his face changed everything. His own body felt like traitor and accuser all in one. Quietly, he spoke.
I suppose it doesn't.
Rushing to the pedestal, Joanne removed Cormu's armor.
Here, Chesney, Medea. Take this. It is my most sacred duty of stewardship to protect and pass on this armor, should the need ever come for it once more. Please, take it.
This artifact was by far the easiest of them all to collect. So, why did it feel like the cost had been too great? He took it into his hands and felt numb as he looked at it. A long-held breath left Wild.
Well, that was sure something. What do we do now, big guy? If I may,
Joanne said.
Trying to leave the way you came would not only be extremely impossible, but if it became known that I gave you the armor, I would be doomed. You could hide the helm in your bag, certainly, but the armor, never. As it happens, I have a path you may use to leave.
Medea asked.
Wait. Aren't you coming with us?
He shook his head.
No, I can't go with you. Not only is there not enough room, but my place is here in Sasquatch. I will simply have to find a way to stay hidden for a time.
Wild had an idea.
Whoa, hold on, Grandpa!
The High Pilgrim said quietly to himself.
Wait a second, Grandpa. I'm barely over 30. Shush! I was trying to say, we have some disguises handy. Should really help out if you want to get away unnoticed.
She handed him Fastjo's purple suit and Medea's feathered hat. Pleasant surprise dawned on his face.
Oh. Well, let me try these on.
He struggled out of his voluminous ceremonial robes and pulled on the actor's clothes on. Spinning around in place, he asked, laughing.
Well, what do you think? Is it me? I kind of always wanted to see what it was like to be a traveling minstrel.
Fastjo had an easy smile and advice to give.
Well, if you really are considering it, there's a wonderful group you could try to speak with outside of Barsus. Barsus?
The man scoffed under his breath while he adjusted his hat.
If I wanted to go live near some racist hicks, I'd go and see my grandparents.
To everyone, he said.
I truly do appreciate the advice, sir. We shall see. Now, come along, and hurry now. I know that nobody has been up here in a long while, but who knows? Maybe people decided to follow you up.
He led them to one of the buildings around the mountaintop summit. Eyes filled with pity and concern in equal measure, Wild and Fastjo ushered their mute leaders to follow. Joanne passed his hand over a seemingly random spot beside the door. The door snapped open.
Hurry. In here. Below, you'll find a boat that you should be able to use to sail westward along the coast. I believe that was where Daphne was staying. Last I heard from her.
Chesney regarded the dark opening, but his mind was elsewhere.
Yes. There's a lot I need to speak to her about.
A hand rested on his shoulder. He turned expecting Medea, but it was Joanne.
I know things seem strange now, but remember, you are still you. Whatever destiny or fate has decided for you, it doesn't matter. It doesn't change that you are you, and how you move forward is still your decision. Take heart, Chesney. You too, Medea.
He managed to smile.
Thanks, Joanne, for that. For the armor. Everything. I wish you luck and safety.
He was even able to push himself to shake the older man's hand when all he wanted to do was disappear. Medea barely reacted. He didn't blame her. They all stepped inside the dark path leading down to a poorly lit landing, and the door slide shut silently behind them. Chesney couldn't look at Medea. Not right now. He didn't want to look at himself, either. To be himself, he wanted to rip off his own skin and see what was truly underneath. I am my own person. I am me. None of this matters. Nothing is different. But he couldn't make himself believe it. End of chapter.